Hi, I'm Lisa from Sew Over It, and I'm going to show you how to add bias binding to an armhole. First, measure round your armhole to get the correct length for your bias binding. Then you would cut your bias binding to the right length. So I've joined my two ends of my bias binding, right sides together, unfold the edges so that it's flat, and if you see I've got a nice diagonal end to both ends. The points will extend from either side, and I'm going to now stitch from this V to that V. And now I'm going to press those seams open. Just a little tip, if you're making your own binding, you'll need to iron over one edge of the binding, but keep the other edge nice and flat. If you're using bought binding like I am, it might help to iron over one edge so that it's flat, but so that you can still see the crease or groove in the binding, because we're going to use that to follow when we're sewing. Starting at the underarm seam, I'm now going to pin the binding to the right side of my armhole, opening out this edge so that it's flat and lining up the raw edge of the armhole with the edge of the binding. So there it is, fully pinned. And now I'm going to sew along that groove on the machine. If you had handmade binding, then you'll be using whatever seam allowance you've allowed for. So I'm starting at the underarm seam, and I'm going to feed this crease line into the middle of my foot. So I'm now going to just put a couple of clips where the underarm of my armhole is, because on this pattern it needs a little bit of releasing so that it will sit flatter once it's turned around. I'm now going to go over to the iron and iron this seam up towards the binding. So now I'm going to fold over the binding so that it's encasing the seam allowance, and this folded edge here needs to sit at least 2 millimeters over the stitch line. And I'm going to pin that all the way around. So now that's fully pinned, but be careful, it's very vicious. And I'm going to take the pins out one at a time and put them back in from the right side, because when we sew this other edge down, we're going to be working from the right side of the garment. So careful not to stab yourself. So now we're ready to sew it. So working from the outside, I've taken the sleeve off my machine. I'm going to slot that on. And I'm going to start at the underarm, and we are going to do what we call stitch in the ditch or sink stitching, where we stitch in the join where the binding meets the armhole of the dress. And there is the binding finished. If we turn to the inside, you can see that because this bit overhung, it's been anchored down, and from the outside it's lovely and neat. And that's how you bias bind an armhole.